But I'm wondering, are our habits that well set now that we're happy in our own little enclaves and we may not come out?
It's tough. No, that's a good question. That's a great question. I think those of us who think that way have to consciously make an effort to do that. But I don't think a lot of people are thinking that way. And I think, like you said, it's so set that it's going farther and farther in that direction. And it's an easy thing to do. It's easy to sit here and, days that I don't have any, like, I don't have to be somewhere for work. I'm just doing emails and stuff. Like you said, I'm just here, just my dog and I. That's why I have to get out of the house. But you're right. We need a reckoning or something to happen where it does. But I mean, these are the greatest things to happen to us, and one of the worst as well sometimes because of the positives and negatives of technology.
Jonathan Niziol is not what you'd expect from an internationally known model. Yes, he's handsome and well spoken, but to get to where he is today, he's had to deal with his shadow side. We all have a shadow side, the part of us that judges and compares and projects our thoughts onto the lives of others. Where do we find truth? Jonathan's story is about a quest for personal truth across several decades, continents, and careers. Please welcome Jonathan Niziol to Bump in the Road. Jonathan Niziol is not what you'd expect from an internationally known model. Yes, he's handsome and well spoken, but to get to where he is today, he's had to deal with his shadow side. We all have a shadow side, the part of us that judges and compares and projects our thoughts onto the lives of others. Where do we find truth? Jonathan's story is about a quest for personal truth across several decades, continents, and careers. Please welcome Jonathan Niziol to Bump in the Road. Jonathan, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
First of all, thank you very much for having me, Pat. Like I said before we started recording, I've been looking forward to this for quite a while. I guess I'll dive right in. So my story really, well, I was born and raised in Canada. I'm coming to you from Texas right now. And I grew up on a farm, a 500-acre cattle farm in Canada. And great childhood, lots of athletics, always been an athlete, still am. But the first bump in the road that I hit, the mountain in the road, we could say, was the day before my 21st birthday, when my mom passed away very suddenly and very unexpectedly. And like I said, it was a mountain. It just rocked my world to the core. And soon after that, I was just trying to go on with life and cope with it and having trouble with it, started dealing with some mental health issues. Mental health wasn't really talked about much back then, so I didn't really know what I was dealing with. That was about 21 years ago. And turned out I had depression, anxiety, panic disorder, and self-harm. And I started getting medicated for that, just an SSRI. But I started to lean pretty hard on the self-medication route, which was, the first one was alcohol. And pretty quickly became a non-functioning alcoholic for the better part of 3.5, maybe 4 years. But I got very lucky because I had another bump in the road. But this is a good bump because I needed this one. And it was a really bad case of acute pancreatitis. And I was 25 years old. I spent just under a month in the hospital. I'd have 5 blood transfusions. I almost died twice while I was in there. I lost 60 pounds in total and 40 pounds in the first 2 weeks. But it definitively put an end to my drinking because I was 25 years old. And, you think, do you think you're invincible? And I could see all the things happening in my body, gaining weight, all that kind of stuff from the alcohol, compromising friendships, relationships with family, all that kind of stuff. But still, you're just like, whatever. But I needed it because I knew I was an alcoholic and I didn't know how I was going to stop. So that definitively put a stop to it. They didn't know why I got the severity of pancreatitis I did. They're like, what you got is kind of like winning the lottery, but in a bad way. I'm like, well, I wish I could have won the lottery. The severity is something that they saw in people who are like in their 80s and they've been drinking since they were, 15 or something like that. But either way, it's what I needed. Like I said, it put a stop to that. I was a professional lacrosse player, and I went back to playing lacrosse and was having just the season of my life. Now I was sober, I was working out, just everything was just flying. And then I had a career-ending knee injury. I thought, okay, I'm looking at things from a more positive lens now. When one door closes, another one opens. Maybe it's time to call it a career. I took it to a professional level. It's starting to take a toll on my body. I'm 26 now. Maybe it's time for something else. And that's when I started to, I went and looked into modeling and started to model and got a contract in Toronto. And then about a year later, I was modeling internationally, getting contracts around the world, and wonderful experiences, meeting people, being around the world, South Africa, Miami, New York, London, England, New York quite a bit. Those are just places I lived. And then I was traveling different places just for shoots and coming back and stuff like that. So it was all very exciting and very fun until I got to Miami. That was my second stop. And I had already started to plant the seed of body dysmorphia in my head, because when I got to South Africa and I saw these guys and, started to compare myself to all these guys that I'd seen on magazine covers and stuff like that. Now I'm competing with them. I'm a larger guy. Just I naturally build muscle easily. It's just my genetics, whatever. And I saw these guys and I'm like, oh, they're huge. They're massive. I have to be like this, that. And I got there and they're much more slender, much leaner. And even though I was getting a lot of work and really busy, I thought, yeah, maybe I need to drop some muscle, and maybe I need to change and be more like, this person or that person. And when I got to Miami, it was actually 2 days after I got to Miami, my agency said I had a casting, and I went to the casting and I ended up being sexually assaulted by the designer. And as I said before, I was a professional lacrosse player. I've been in a lot of physical altercations in my life, whether it's bar fights, after my mom passed away, a lot of misplaced anger, stuff of that nature. So I thought, okay, I'm going to beat this person to death. And then I thought to myself, okay, well, go to jail for life. And I just got out of there. But 2 weeks later, not coincidentally, I started about an 8-year battle with an eating disorder, because I let that body dysmorphia just finally get the better of me, So that started to happen. And I noticed I was starting to get burned out with living on the road. You be in a place and start to, set up a routine and I'd be dating a girl or whatever. And then they'd be like, hey, great news. We got a agency wants you to go over to wherever. It's like, oh, well, I was just getting comfortable here. And so I decided I wanted some normalcy, and I moved back to Toronto to put down roots. I wanted to start a fitness business, my own fitness business. And I wanted to get a dog who's over there somewhere sleeping. And I found, though, that I missed the distraction of traveling. My life is all about distractions and doing all the things that I could to distract myself from the traumas and the things that I was feeling. And I missed the distraction of traveling, and I needed something to lean on. So I went back to self-medication, and now it was drugs. And I dealt with 4 drug addictions, pretty heavy, very heavy use of marijuana, nitrous oxide, Adderall, and the last one was a muscle relaxer. So this is for years this is going on, and I just resigned to the fact, okay, I'm going to be a drug addict for the rest of my life. This is just the way it's going to be. This is my coping mechanism. It's whatever. But slowly, kind of, my friend told me and put it in this way, and it's an interesting way to think about it. The universe was kind of telling me that each one of these substances wasn't for me. I was having bad experiences with each one of them, where I was like, okay, I got to push that one out, and then I go to the next one and push that one out, and go to the next one. So the last one was muscle relaxers, and they were just over-the-counter muscle relaxers, and each pill had 500 milligrams of methocarbamol. That's the active muscle relaxer, and 200 milligrams of ibuprofen. And it says, don't take more than 12 per day or something like that. Well, that's for other people. I mean, when I do something, I go all in. If I'm going to be a lacrosse player, I'm going to be a professional lacrosse player. I'm going to drink, I'm going to be an alcoholic. When I do things, it's so I got to the point pretty quickly where I was taking 100 pills every single day. every day I was ingesting 50,000 milligrams of methocarbamol and 20,000 milligrams of ibuprofen. And I had a couple experiences where the ibuprofen version of it wasn't available. So I got the acetaminophen version, and I would just go home. Everything looked great on the outside. I'd wake up, I'd train my clients. I'd go to a shoot. I'd go to the gym. Everything looked great. And then I'd come home and it'd be like, yikes, these are my feelings. I'm alone. I can't be alone with my feelings. So I was very insular with all my addictions and stuff. It wasn't like, hey, let's get together, party and stuff. It was just like, well, it's better than feeling my feelings, one of those kind of things. And a couple times I got the acetaminophen version of them, and I got home and just dumped like 30 or 40 in my hand and popped them, and woke up, vomiting profusely. I was overdosing on Tylenol, and I've told this story to a number of doctors, and they're like, "Oh, you should have died." They're like, "You should have absolutely died. That is a clear cut, massive overdose of Tylenol." Ibuprofen you can kind of get away with a little bit, but it started to eat away at my insides, and I had a large ulcer, intestinal ulcer that was bleeding, and I was seeing the effects of it. I was losing weight. I had no energy. I was having fainting spells. My anxiety was through the roof because of all this stuff. And that's when I finally decided, okay, I was 35 years old at the time. And I thought to myself, okay, I've been doing this for the better part of 15 years. This cycle of, just trying to distract myself. I can either graduate to the next level of drugs, because I kind of had run out of the baseline drugs. And I was like, I can either go up and start taking oxy, whatever, and hydro or cocaine, whatever. And I know for a fact, I almost lost my life many times as it is. I know for a fact my life will be over. Or I can do something else drastic that I'd been putting off for the longest time. And I always had excuses as to why I didn't want to do it. And that was go to therapy and finally learn how to live with and deal with these things that I've dealt with, and also learn how to be a sober, functioning adult for the first time in my life at 35, because I'd never been that. And that's what I did. And I harken back to my childhood on the farm, because I grew up with, it's minus 40 degrees. My father owned an architecture design business as well. So he'd be, away on a business trip. I was the only boy. And so it's minus 40 degrees. It's February. The cows need hay in all the pastures. I've got to go out there and do it. I don't want to do it, but I have to. Like, it's the way it is on a farm. You don't get up and do things because you want to. You have to do them. And it's hard work. And same thing in the summertime. It'd be nice and sunny. My friends are at their cottages and, enjoying or whatever, and skateboarding. And I'd love to be skateboarding and, doing that. But, we've got 3 or 4 days of just doing hay or building fences to do. And it's like, okay, that's just what we have to do. So I went with that mentality, and I said, I have to do this. I have to beat this, and I can't let this beat me. And holy, did things get hard. It was just all of these, what I thought were nicely tucked away, compartmentalized boxes of trauma and all that kind of stuff that I'd, been not dealing with. And they just started to collapse in on me, and I started to deal with them. And I didn't have any kind of a substance or anything to fall back on. But it's the best fight I've ever fought in my life, and the most necessary and the most rewarding, because yes, it was hard work. Yes, there are many times I didn't think I would get through it, but I did, with that same persistence and that mentality of, like I said, the farm and with athletics and stuff like that. Like, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And I'd always said, I'm not going to go to therapy. Therapy's for wimps. I'm not going to have somebody sit there and judge me. I don't have the time. I had lots of time for drugs. I don't have the money. I had lots of money for drugs. And I was just like, enough's enough. Okay, I have to do something. And that's what I did. And the only reason that I can sit here and talk to you about this now is that within the last year, I would say, the the therapy and getting sober happened, I think, 7 years ago, from like completely from 16 years sober from alcohol, and then 7 something years from drugs. But just within the last year, I've actually come to forgive myself. And it's an interesting thing because it wasn't like I'd been working on it kind of a thing. It was just kind of oh, I can let go of this. And what I mean by that is I forgive myself for the bumps in the road and the wrong turns that I made, whether it's alcohol, drugs, the eating disorder, whatever. Those things that I consciously did that weren't productive. But you know what? I look back at it and I'm like, you know what? I was trying my best. I didn't have the tools. With the tools that I had at the time, I was trying my best. So I can let go of that. I can't get the time back. I can't get the money back. I wish I could get the money back. It's so much money, so much money, but I can't. And I forgive myself. And then the things that happened to me, like my mom passing away and the sexual assault, it's like, okay, I forgive myself for those things because they're unfortunate facts of life that happened to me, and I can't do anything about it. So I finally let go of that and said, okay, I can talk about this, and I can talk about this, starting to talk with friends, and then just talk about it publicly, because it doesn't change the person that I am, and it made me who I am, and I'm pretty proud of the person that I've become, and I'm continuing to work on being and learning and growing. So that's kind of the quick version of my story, and it wasn't all gloom and doom. Lots of great times in between, but those were the hurdles, the main hurdles that I had to deal with, the main bumps and hills and valleys and mountains and whatever word for a big, large object there is in the road, and the different paths that I was taking. Good paths too, though. Like I said, I stopped playing lacrosse. I thought I'd try modeling, and I wouldn't know where my life would be without that. And yeah, I would say that's kind of the brief overview of what I've been through, and how I've dealt with those things and gotten to where I'm at.
One of the things you mentioned about all the travel, which had to be just fantastic on one level,
Hmm.
was that it was a distraction. And it is I've turned to travel often as a distraction, but also on the other side of it, I think it's a mirror. And travel lets you maybe know yourself a little bit in a deeper
Oh
sense
yeah,
than if you just stayed home.
yep, very much so. I had wonderful experiences traveling, and I really regained a lot of self confidence traveling, which I lost afterwards from the drug addictions and stuff, and then I had to rebuild. But yeah, every time you land in a new city and you have to make a life there, and I need to find a new grocery store, a new gym, and meet new friends and that kind of stuff. And the people are like, I don't know how you could do that. It's so scary. And it's like, it is kind of, but it's also, very liberating. And it very much put into perspective for me. I was raised to be very humble, and my parents instilled that in me. And but this definitely brought it to the next level, where you show up in New York or London or wherever, and there are just tens of millions of people trying to live their lives just like we are. And I'm like, oh, I'm a little part of this whole thing. I'm an important part for sure, but I'm just a little part of this whole bigger thing. So it really put that into perspective. But and also with the traveling and meeting people and them not knowing what I had been through, it also put into perspective, you don't know what people have been through. You don't judge a book by its cover, and don't assume, because people that I knew when I was going through my drug addictions and stuff like that, until I started talking about it publicly, they're like, dude, we thought you had it all together. We thought you had like the perfect life. Like you were just great shape. You're, international model, all the, you own a personal training business. And I think everybody deserves your respect, because you just don't know what people are going through. And it doesn't matter if it's, the person who collects your garbage every week. It doesn't matter if it's the person who owns the company you work for. It doesn't matter who it is. Everybody deserves the same amount of respect, because we are all equal. We are all just human beings trying to make our way through this.
I think sometimes this human journey is incredibly isolating.
Yes.
And we don't talk about it. We don't bring it up. And I was having a conversation the other day, actually. I have this massive network through the podcast and the book and things like that,
Mm.
fascinating people. And yet, on a day-to-day basis, I don't necessarily see many people, like, live.
Yeah.
And I think that's a disconnect that's happening across all age groups right now.
Big time. Yes. Extremely.
And
Extremely.
we need to find a way to get face to face again and actually be with people.
Yeah. We really do. And I know of and hear about so many stories of, and I'm guilty of it too. I mean, we seem like we're interacting when we're, going like this on our phone for 30 minutes and stuff, or a couple hours, whatever it is. But we're really just sitting here alone. And that's a big reason why I go to the gym and I play hockey, and I don't go out and socialize in the traditional sense of drinking and that kind of stuff. But I still need to make an effort to go out and do that, because I find myself, and you hear about, not, I mean, a lot of kids who are being raised in this, but also adults, we're doing it too, who are very isolating. And it's hard when you open your phone, this idea of comparison, the one that led me to an eating disorder. And then the other comparison where you open your phone up and there's, some guy's got abs from here all the way down to, like, you're like, what? Like, that's not even a what? Like, how's that possible? Like 2, 4, 6, 8, like how many abs is that? Or you open it up and there's a 23-year-old kid who's got 4 Lamborghinis, and you're like, what? I don't even have any. I have 0 Lamborghinis. And we have to really put that in perspective. And I always say that I now have, as I've gotten older, I've worked much harder to keep this a healthy place, and to take that stuff in and keep it in perspective, but also recognize if something isn't making me feel good about myself for whatever reason, then I need to, push it out of my life. And same thing with people. I think it's very important to keep your circle and the people that you do encounter. And sometimes people are on their own journeys and it's just not the right time. And I wish everybody the best, whatever happens. And it's just, somebody does me wrong or whatever. It's like, okay, well, I gave you a shot, and we're not meant to be. I wish you all the best, but I'm just going to go on with my life, and you can go on with yours. But yes, it's very important.
I think paying attention to your mental health needs to be on the top of everybody's list. I know for me, going through cancer is what really drove it home that you have to have your head together. You have to just get it together. And I think that as you go through this journey, recognizing when you're judging, recognizing when you're looking at that hierarchy, oh, they look better, they have this, they have that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so detrimental. It doesn't do anybody any good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very true. It's so true. It really doesn't. A friend of mine told me a story. She's a restaurant manager and manages a group of restaurants, whatever. And she was talking to one of her employees, younger, then she had a couple of these conversations, and they had a whole group of friends online, and that's what they do. They leave home and go jump online. And she's like, how often do you actually see your friends? And they're like, maybe once a year. Like, once a year? I'm like, what? Like, that is, they see them online, they communicate, but they're just sitting in the room by themselves in different groups and different chats and stuff, and having like these virtual parties where you can break off into a private room and make out or whatever. I don't know how that all works and stuff, but the actual human interaction of it wasn't there. And yes, you have to keep your mind. This is our greatest asset or our biggest enemy. And I've done the whole take care of your body thing, but ignore mind and spirit. And I've realized that it's all three. It's mind, body, and spirit. And in whatever spirit means to whomever, like whatever that means. But yeah, you can't ignore one and not take care of the others, because that's just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting when you meet people in person, you get a totally different impression because you recognize maybe their size, their mannerisms. I mean, I talk with my hands. You can't see that really here.
Mhm.
But it's a totally different experience, and I think we're moving away from it. There's no question about that. I think we're ready for something to come back into our society to really encourage us to get together. But I'm wondering, are our habits that well set now that we're happy in our own little enclaves and we may not come out?
It's tough. No, that's a good question. That's a great question. I think those of us who think that way have to consciously make an effort to do that. But I don't think a lot of people are thinking that way. And I think, like you said, it's so set that it's going farther and farther in that direction. And it's an easy thing to do. You know, it's easy to sit here and, you know, days that I don't have any, like, I don't have to be somewhere for work. I'm just doing emails and stuff. Like you said, I'm just here, just my dog and I. Like, that's why I have to get out of the house. But you're right. We need a reckoning or something to happen where it does. But I mean, these are the greatest things to happen to us, and, you know, one of the worst as well sometimes, because of the positives and negatives of technology.
You know, I want to go back to something you said earlier. You were talking about how when you landed in a new city, you would have, you have to reinvent yourself to a degree. You have to find new places to shop, etc. I think that's outside anybody's comfort zone. But I think learning to be comfortable outside your comfort zone is really a great gift.
Definitely.
I mean, that's
Definitely.
where creativity happens. That's where adventure happens.
Yep. I'm a big believer in life happens outside of your comfort zone. And it was funny because I went from that and that sense of self-esteem and felt self-awareness to be able to do that. And then I regressed, having moved back and then getting into drug addiction and stuff like that, where then I had to relearn. And, you know, the few friends that I would talk to when I was finally ready to get help, and I'd say, you know, I'm struggling. And they're like, dude, you're Jonathan Niziol. You're the one who's traveled the world. You've done this, done that. I'm like, I don't feel like that person anymore. I don't feel like that person. Like, I stopped saying that. Like, I'm not that person. They're like, you are that person. And I had to relearn how to do that and to embrace it. And I remember when I was going through the drug addiction and I was still in Toronto and I wasn't planning on moving to Texas yet. I said to my dad, like, I think I'm going to move somewhere else in Toronto. He's like, why? I'm like, I don't know, just change the scenery. And he said to me, because I was very guarded with what I was dealing with, he's like, I know you're going through some stuff. I don't know what it is. You know, you don't tell me much. If you want to tell me, whatever. But he's like, just know that wherever you go, your problems are going to follow you. It's not, you know, just moving from one side of Toronto to the other is not going to magically, you know, fix all your problems. And then after doing a number of years of therapy and getting to a place where I was looking at the potential of moving to Texas, I was doing it for the right reasons. I was moving towards opportunity and not running away from who I was. I was ready now to, you know, get back out there like I was before and, you know, take that leap towards something as opposed to running away from something. I think that's an important thing too. But
I think that's a huge distinction, actually, and it requires a lot of awareness on your part to be able to see that.
yeah, no, and it was scary. It was, you know, it was outside. It was way outside my comfort zone. You know, I packed up and put a trailer on my Jeep and grabbed my dog and drove 28 hours. And, you know, it was just me. You know, everybody's like, "Did you move here with somebody?" I'm like, "No." "Do you know anybody?" "Nope." "Wow, that sounds scary." It is. It is. And that's the thing. Even with my travel for modeling, I always had a return date. Even though I was bouncing around and stuff, I always had I'll go back to Toronto, you know, on such a date. But this was a definitive, and it's been one of the best things that I've decided to do because it was the right time. People here are lovely here. It feels like home. And, you know, I love Canada. I had a wonderful upbringing there and still have great friends, but it's that moving towards opportunity and reclaiming that sense of self-confidence that I had lost and broken. And excuse me, I was talking to my therapist and just talking about how I've had to rebuild my self-confidence. And after all the years of bringing myself down and she's like, yeah, self-esteem and self-confidence can be completely taken away or ruined with one sentence, and it can take a lifetime to rebuild. And that's
Oh,
another
that's so
reason.
true.
It absolutely is so true. And that's another reason why I think that as a society, we need to lead with more grace and to really, you know, be like, hold back on putting that comment under somebody's picture, like, oh, you look like whatever, you know, whatever it is. Like, really, let's lead with grace, because I never want anybody to experience. I don't have enemies, but even if I had, like, I wouldn't want my worst enemy to, excuse me, to experience that. I would never want anybody to experience that. And I will never be the result or the reason why somebody experiences that, because I know what it's like, and I've had to rebuild, and man, it was hard, brick by brick by brick. And then the wall falls down, and then you got to start again and pick up those bricks. And I would never do that to somebody.
It is hard, and I think that when you've been through those things, exactly as you're saying, you don't wanna do that to somebody else, but the other thing that happens, if you're thoughtful about it, is you start to or at least for me, I'll say, I recognize there's a space between when something happens or somebody says something and I have to react, and in that space, I have a choice. Can I be kind? Can I be questioning? Can I not return an attack? How can I behave that may lead to a different outcome?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. I have a quick story that just happened to me a couple weeks ago that is very much along the lines of that. I was driving to the gym. It was just a regular morning, and I'm driving. I'm not a big speeder. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's dangerous. Whatever. That's just the way I see it. So I'm just doing the speed limit driving, and somebody's pulling up behind me. I notice they're getting a little bit closer. I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe some people just don't have the same sense of distance. And then I see somebody in the background, like starting to like give me the finger and like all these gestures. And I'm like, oh, this is weird. So I turn right, and I see this person pull up next to me, and he's, flipping me off and, yelling and stuff. And as I'm going to turn left into my gym, I see him turn right into a gas station. And I was like, I was like, I need to go, I need to know I need to figure this out. So I cut across when I had a chance, and I go in there and I pull over, and this guy comes screeching, like gunning towards me, and I'm leaning against my vehicle. And I'm like, I'm not going to flinch. If this guy hits me, he's going to hit me. But he turns the last minute, comes to a screeching halt. And he's like, what's your problem? The speed limit's 40. What do you like? I was like, yeah, it means I can go up to 40 and not exceed it. Doesn't mean I have to go 40. I was going like 37, 36 miles, like whatever. And he starts going off and gets out of his car. And I'm like, man, what's going on here? Like, I was ready for a physical altercation if it got to that point. But I was like, man, what's going on here? It's a beautiful day right now. I'm like, what's happening? Like, what is this about? And we started talking, and he's like, I've got so much going on in my life, and you don't have any stresses, and look at you, like. And I was like, oh, you want to talk about like? And I just quickly listed off those things, and immediately his aggression dropped. And he's like, are you serious? He's like, I'm dealing with alcohol problems right now. I'm like, I get it, man. He's like, I'm working 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. And I'm putting a burden on my family and all that kind of stuff. And we ended up having a conversation for like 20 minutes, and a positive, constructive conversation. And I'm like, I get it, man. I know what you're at. I know exactly where you're at. I've been exactly right there, and I have my bad days. And at the end of it, he's like, throughout it, he's like, I'm so sorry, man. He's like, you're such a nice guy. I shouldn't have done that. I was like, don't worry about it, man. I was like, I get it. I understand I totally understand. I've been there. And he's like, man, you're such a nice guy. And he's like, I don't know if you believe in God, but I believe that there's a reason why we met, and it was you and not somebody else. And he's like, thanks, by the way, for not getting out and beating me up, because I got out and saw you. And I was like, I made a big mistake when you were standing there. And I was like, it's fine. And after, it was like, okay, man, well, he was like, do you mind if I take a picture of you? I'm like, why? He's like, I just want to like really remember this. I was like, why don't we take a picture together? So we, arm in arm, we took a smiling selfie at the end of this, and his wife reached out on Facebook and was like, hey, I'm so sorry about what my husband did. He's not usually like that. And I was like, don't be sorry. That was a great interaction. I made a friend that day. I made a friend, and it was a very interesting and very timely thing whereas before I would have gotten out and just gotten in a fight because that's where I was at. But I was like, I need to figure out what this is. If it goes to that place, then yes, I'll defend myself. But I need to understand why this is happening, why he feels this way. And it, like I said, it turned out to be a wonderful exchange and experience for the both of us. A great way to start the morning.
That's a great story.
Yeah, it was really nice. And I check in on him and stuff. And his wife follows me on Facebook now, and she's listened to a bunch of my podcasts. And I just check in to see how he's doing. And he messaged me, 5-6 days after our original altercation. So I was like, hey man, can you send me that picture? Like, I really want to have that. It was such a great memory. I want to have that in my phone as well. And he did. And he's like, hey man, like I haven't drank since we talked. I'm like, that's awesome, man. Like, that's good for you. Like, that's awesome. So I'll check in, and I'll text him today and just check in and see how he's doing. And yeah, it's wonderful. I think these things happen for a reason, but it's the state of mind that I'm in now. Whereas before, I was miserable, and I would have loved to get in a fight. I would have gone out there with no, like, with only rage and same thing with the misery loves company. I wanted to bring everybody down to where I was at, everybody down. Whereas now I'm feeling at a place where I want to try and bring people up if they're down, or be on the same wavelength, and have people who can help me through my bad days and stuff like that. So it's very much of the mindset that you're in, and you keep yourself in.
I think you have to meet people where they are. And if you've been there, you can do that. And I think that can be incredibly helpful in terms of lifting people up.
Yeah. Yep. I totally agree with that. I think that relatability is a big thing, especially when I was training my clients. People they'd kind of, be guarded because, oh, Jonathan, the model, the personal trainer, look at them. And the first thing I would do would be like, here, this is what I looked like when I was an alcoholic. And their defenses would drop. And it's like, this is what I was. And this is what and they're like, oh, so you get it. Like, you've actually been there. You're not just here to judge me and no, I would never do that. I've got zero room to judge. I've made and continue to make tons of mistakes. And that helps to, lower people's defense mechanisms, because they think, well, this person's never, this guy's probably got abs from here to here, and, all those things. And having been there and really understanding, and you can sympathize with people, but understanding and having walked that path, or dealt with those bumps in the road that people might be going through is a different kind of thing. Like with what you're doing with your podcast and connecting with people like that, it's a very different thing.
If you could rewrite your story, would you?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If I could go back, I've been asked a couple of times, what would you say to 21-year-old Jonathan? Just lost my mom. What would you say? I wouldn't say don't drink. I wouldn't say don't do this. I wouldn't say anything. I would just say, look, it's going to take a long time. It's going to be really hard, but you're going to get through it. And that last part I really would have needed to hear, because there are hundreds of times I didn't think I was going to get through it. But I wouldn't change a thing, would not change a thing, because it's made me who I am today. And I'm, very happy with the person I am today. And I stand behind my mistakes and, the things that, and I know I wouldn't, not even for a second.